of the few things I remember from college is a book that was assigned reading. Actually, there were two books, Man, Child, and a Promised Land, and the other one was the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. Alex Haley, you may remember, was the author of Roots, which was a very popular best-selling book, and also was a television series which told the story of slavery from Africa coming to the United States and bringing it up to modern times. And the autobiography of Malcolm X, Malcolm X sat down with Alex Haley and essentially told his story. And there's still a number of things in the autobiography of Malcolm X that I still remember. That was more than 30-some years ago. If you haven't read the autobiography of Malcolm X, it's a worthwhile book to read. There's a lot of instructive material in it. But there's a particular scene in the film Malcolm X where Malcolm Little, and Malcolm Little was Malcolm X's original name. He also went by the name of Detroit Red. He was from Detroit and he had red hair. But when he converted to the Nation of Islam, he adopted the last name of X because Little was his ancestral slave name. It was given to him by his slave master, and so the X represented his lost African heritage name. And generally what happens is later on, those who convert, blacks who convert to Islam, will take on a Muslim name. You had Cassius Clay, who took on the name Muhammad Ali. Lou Alcindor took on the name Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Again, this is typical, but early on in the Nation of Islam, you found that they would take just take the last name of X as a designation for the African name that they lost. Louis Farrakhan went for originally as Louis X, again with the same idea. But there's a particular scene in Malcolm X where Malcolm Little is in prison for theft, and he is introduced to the teaching of the the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who represented the Nation of Islam. And there's a fellow prisoner, it's a composite character named John Elton Bembry, who's trying to get Malcolm Little to understand that his life is significant and has meaning. He wasted his life when he was outside of prison, and he's wasting his life inside prison. And Bembry sees something in Malcolm Little, and he introduces him to the basics of the Nation of Islam. Now, Malcolm resists this. He's very, very stubborn at this point and very superstitious. And so what Bembry does is to work him through the philosophy of the Nation of Islam, but Malcolm isn't buying it at first. And then he takes him to a dictionary and the definition of black. And it's at this point where Bembry tries to show Malcolm that his real problem in the world, and the problem of all blacks, is white culture, white society. And there's a lot of history within the Nation of Islam of the origin of the white race. They're called blue-eyed devils and so forth. I don't want to get into all that. I'm moving into the idea that everything today is based upon race. That no matter what you say today, it's racial, and that's how Malcolm Little, who then becomes Malcolm X, gets introduced to the Nation of Islam. And so what Bembry does, he takes Malcolm to a Webster's dictionary, and he takes him to the word black, and he wants Malcolm he reads out the words, the definitions of black: destitute of light, devoid of color, enveloped in darkness, utterly dismal or gloomy, soiled with dirt, foul, sullen, hostile, forbidding, outrageously wicked, and then mentions terms like black sheep and blackmailed. And it said any attribute related to black, it's a negative attribute. And this left an indelible mark upon Malcolm, and especially when he went to the definition of white. And here Malcolm begins to read the color of pure snow, the opposite of black, free from spot or blemish, innocent, pure, without evil intent, harmless, square deal, honest. And then at that point, Malcolm makes the connection. This is written by white folks, right? White is wrong, black is right. And so at that point, at least in the film, Malcolm Little gains this understanding of the Nation of Islam that white is bad, black is now good. It's the white man who has redefined everything culturally and socially. And if you want to change your people, you have to reinterpret things all through a black matrix. And so Malcolm Little became Malcolm X and embraced the racist ideology of the Nation of Islam. And what goes on here is that Malcolm leaves prison, becomes a very articulate spokesman for the Nation of Islam. While in prison, he reads voraciously. He picks up the dictionary and actually begins to write out all of the definitions of all of the words in the dictionary. Begins with the very first word in the dictionary, aardvark, and gets an education just by using the dictionary and becomes self-educated, becomes a great spokesman for the black community under the matrix of the Nation of Islam. Now, Malcolm, later in his career, this is probably in the maybe 1963, 1964, Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965 by three representatives of the Nation of Islam. It was begin to see here that the whites aren't the only ones who have the devil in them, because Malcolm is killed by three black men. But Malcolm earlier in the 1960s had broken with the Nation of Islam on a number of different issues, and it didn't sit well with the organization's leadership. And this included Elijah Muhammad and Louis X, known better today as Louis Farrakhan. But while in Mecca on a pilgrimage, he wrote the following to his assistants at the Harlem Mosque. Remember, Malcolm X comes out of prison as a racist. The white man is the problem. And he saw everything in terms of black and white. Black is now good, white is now evil. But then he goes on a Hajj to Mecca, and he sees something rather spectacular. And he writes back and he says, "Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and the overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as is practiced by people of all colors and races. You may be shocked by these words coming from me, but on this pilgrimage, what I have seen and experienced has forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions." And it was at this point you find that Malcolm X gives up his racist ways. Now, this brings me to the point of all of this, and that it seems like today everybody sees everything in terms of race today. Malcolm X had abandoned this concept of everything in terms of race, in terms of color, but there are still people today, like Joy Behar, who on The View, when she heard about Black Friday, she says, "Today is Black Friday all day long." And Behar offers this. Isn't it a little racist to call it Black Friday? She saw everything in terms of race. And actually, Black Friday is a good thing. To be in the black means to have money in the bank. You don't want to be in the red. You want to be in the black. And it's unfortunate today that too many people have not embraced what Malcolm X embraced at the end of his life, is that we need to quit viewing things in terms of color. We need to deal with things in terms of ethics. What does Scripture say about what we ought to do as Christians?